Welcome, everybody, into another edition of the Sun Solar Panel. I'm your host, Greg Esposito. As you can tell, Tompkins and Dave King have the evening day, whenever you're listening to this, off, as I think Dave is looking for a new old folks home to move into, and Tim is frantically looking for a new pair of glasses. But I figured we should at least do an episode this weekend, since the Suns had one of the wildest two-game swings in NBA preseason that I've ever seen. And to discuss it with me, I brought in a good friend of mine and now a friend of the program, Ralph Amsden. Ralph, how are you, man?
I'm excited. I'm a fan of this show. I listen to it all the time. I just finished the Man Crush episode. I had to go back and listen to that, and I'm genuinely honored to be on a podcast stage with a fellow Marco Milic fan.
Oh, yes.
I felt alone for a very long time before this.
I actually wanted, and I think I've told this story before, but I wanted to name this the Sons of Marco Milic podcast, but we decided better against it. So as much as I want everybody to know, we're not actually related, even though we kind of look like we could be here. But we're
Right?
not. We're just buddies through a good friend of ours, Eric Sorensen, who hooked us up. And if you don't know Ralph, check out his stuff on Twitter, on Arizona Varsity. That's .com, Arizona Sportscast. .com. You got to check out Ralph's work. He does amazing stuff out there, and glad to have him a part of the program. And Ralph, I got to ask you, we saw the Suns against the Kings earlier this week. Well, we kind of saw it if you illegally watched it or
Right?
listened to it on the radio, and it wasn't pretty from all accounts. It was just not a well played basketball game for the Suns. And then they turn around on Saturday night. They play in Portland against the Portland Trailblazers, and they play what was one of the prettier games we've seen from the Phoenix Suns, even though it's only preseason. I don't know if you can set a franchise record in preseason, but I think they technically
I
set a
don't care.
franchise
Yeah.
franchise record for most three-pointers ever made by a Suns team, hitting 24 of them in the game. And the craziest part is they did it without Devin Booker, without Ricky Rubio, and without DeAndre Ayton on the court. I have no clue who the Suns team is. The only thing I'm sure of right now is that preseason basketball is a fickle mistress.
But an exciting one. But one that you risk everything for.
This
I
is
mean,
true.
I'm
As with
trying.
most mistresses.
Yes. I'm trying as hard as I can not to express opinions, and that's something I'm so holding back. Anything has always been terribly, terribly hard for me. After dropping 136 with 24 threes, with your best players sitting out, um, I mean, I don't know what to say. Everybody was shooting, the ball was moving around, uh, which doesn't always happen when you're trying to mesh everybody together in preseason basketball. Um, Ty Jerome has me feeling things. I mean, I remember, and I think he's just mature as a basketball player. You know what he is right now. Like he can only really get better at what it is that he does. And mentioning him in the same breath as Steve Nash, I think, is a sin. But Steve Nash was a 4-year player coming out of Santa Clara,
Mhm.
and when he came in, there was a maturity to his game, and then there were already a bunch of players at his position, so he didn't need to be good immediately. And I don't think the Suns really need anything from any of the new guys. Like they don't have to come in and play 30 minutes and be a cornerstone right now, but we have to move out of the projects. That's what we have to do as a franchise, and I think that they've got some maturity to their youth, and I very much appreciate it. It's very welcome, and that was a special preseason game. There hasn't been a lot to be excited about, and I'm happy to, if people want to call it overreacting, what I'm happy to celebrate it. I know that the what was it, AZ Central came out with a column today that said you can't celebrate an actual victory from the Arizona Cardinals. I'm more than happy to celebrate a preseason victory from the Phoenix Suns.
You know what? I don't understand. Be excited. I mean, we don't get a lot to be excited about, and it wasn't like that they shot 33% and hit 24 threes. Like they just
No.
were bombarded. They went 53%. They only shot 43 or 45 of them. I mean, it was not like it was a crazy output. And I think what this tells us is this is not the same Monty Williams that we saw coaching in New Orleans. This is not something that New Orleans team that he coached would have done. And I like that because we had no clue coming in what a Monty Williams offensive system would look like or what to expect. And now I'm fairly intrigued by this. I know the .5 offense, and we've heard a lot of coaches talk about this, but these players seem to have bought in, and they. You mentioned Ty Jerome. I mean, that's just one example of they drafted young, experienced guys in him and Cam Johnson. They come in with maturity. They're not 19-year-old kids who had 1 year of college basketball, or an 18-year-old from Europe who had never experienced basketball here in the States. These are guys that can come in, will know their role, will be able to do that. And then you look at the roster, and I mean, you've got Tyler Johnson, who's your sixth man now, and instead of having to be the starting point guard, there's depth with this team. Mikal Bridges will be with that second unit with Kelly Oubre in the starting lineup. Now, Aaron Baines, even though he started on Saturday night, will be your backup center. This is a team. This isn't an accumulation of a lot of young talent. This is a legitimate team here now.
Yeah, I think you made the most important point is that, I think that maybe basketball is like a lot of other things in life where, 10% is supposed to do 50% of the work. And in that can be a really fickle thing when you're depending on a star, especially when you're a franchise that I'm rebuilding doesn't seem like the right word, but when you're a franchise that is constantly kind of sifting through the rubble, right? You don't need somebody to be out there picking up the most stones. You need everybody to work together to clean this mess up. And my ideal Phoenix Suns franchise for the 2019-2020 season is one where nobody needs to do anything.
Yeah.
Is one where you're not 100% dependent on anyone for anything except for maybe that final bucket. And obviously we know whose responsibility that would be if they were in that situation. And I hope to be in that situation more this year than in previous years. But I just don't look at this team and see a bunch of people where we say, all right, this, Josh Jackson, it was constantly, he needs to work on this or he needs to work on his shot. On this team, everybody just needs to make sure that the people that are out there are playing to their strengths and that the mix is good. And I think that Monty Williams can do that. There are a lot of players here that have experience on other teams or have a lot of collegiate experience and aren't necessarily still learning the game. And so when you have a guy like Josh Jackson and DeAndre Ayton on the court at the same time, and they're still figuring out what they can do with all their talents, that's an issue. You only want maybe one of those guys on the court at any given time, and you don't want to have to depend on them. DeAndre Ayton is 3 years away from us seeing what he's actually going to be. I look at him and I see Brad Daugherty. That's who I see. And Brad Daugherty was who he maxed out his talent before the back injury in year 5. And I think most players start to get to that point. So DeAndre Ayton's exciting, but you shouldn't need anything from him right now. And I don't see this as a team that could put anybody out with any lineup and say like, all right, well, we're completely dependent on shooting from X. We're completely dependent on defense from Y. I think that everybody can do a little bit of everything. And I don't know. It's one preseason game. I mean, 2 if you're counting the wins, but I'm excited. I'm excited to see where they go from here.
Yeah, certainly. And you bring up guys just playing to what they know. And you look at Frank Kaminsky all
Yeah.
3 games, but in particular in that Portland game. I mean, he didn't have a great shooting night, but he comes up with 8 assists and shot well from beyond the arc. He's a guy that has impressed me because he is just doing the things. He's playing within his own game. You bring up DeAndre Ayton not having to be anything in particular, and you have Monty Williams saying, "Look, I'm not expecting him to be a leader. I'm just expecting him to go out there and play." And
Yeah.
he struggled in the Sacramento game. Everybody did, but that first preseason game, he came out and was spectacular in that. I just want to see growth from him. We need Devin Booker to just be the guy we've seen. Ricky Rubio already came in and was pretty good in that first game he played. He calms down the offense. I mean, it's amazing what an NBA level point guard can do for a team. Unlike what we saw, the mess of players last year that were playing. So I feel encouraged by so much of this, and yet I'm terrified by the fact that I'm encouraged by it because I feel like we've gone down this road before, and we got we got smacked in the face pretty hard numerous times. But something about this feels different, and I keep defaulting back to that 48 win team in Ryan McDonough and Jeff Hornacek's first
Okay.
year, because it felt like there was something different, that there was something different with that group of guys. And granted, I was much closer then because I worked for the organization, but from afar now, it seems like that even in that Sacramento game where everything was going wrong, there was a play where, and the clip's been on Twitter. You can go look for it. But basically, somebody fell down under the basket. It's escaping me who it was, but all 4 of his teammates for the Suns ran over and helped him back up. That's not something we've seen in the past, and it's those little things that go a long way to building that culture. And I understand it. Culture sounds like a buzzword because we've heard every coach and every general manager throw it around like it's nothing over the past 9 years. But it's those little things that show it in those moments that don't matter, like the second preseason game when you're getting beat up by the Sacramento Kings. But those little things like that moment, I think, add up to bigger things later on in the season.
Yeah. And with culture, culture is an inside out thing, right? You need to have something in you that shows. You can't just, it's not like I could, dye my goatee's a little bit blonde, but I could dye it black. I could put on some eyeliner. I could wear all black. I could listen to The Cure. That doesn't make me God. Like the people who truly are, it's something in them that manifests in all of those things, right? And so everybody has come in here and tried to urgently shape culture from the outside in. If we just get these things, maybe it'll seep down to the core of who this team is, and they'll start acting like a real team. And the truth is, you can't do that. You have to get people in who are all willing to be self-sacrificial, who are willing to be on the same page, who appreciate the game of basketball, who, I hate to say it, but you got guys who were 2 years removed from being ranked. I work with Rivals, the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 player in the entire country. And so for them, it's more about branding and expectations, and expecting to get to that star status right away than it is about making sure that you're just good enough to be on the court. Like, who makes the best coaches? The backup point guards, or lifelong scrappy point guards, or small forwards who had that were glue guys, or even like in James Jones's case as a GM, and he was one of those, right? And so people who want to be there and understand that this could also possibly be their last contract, but have enough talent to be there in the first place. And I think that with Dario Saric, who I love, with Frank Kaminsky, Ty Jerome, these are all super talented guys, but they all know that in order to stick in this league, they're going to have to fight to stay. DeAndre Ayton could accidentally be in this league 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Olowokandi was like a 10-year vet. So you need to have guys that are still fighting for position, who love the game of basketball and who don't have these massive, massive, massive expectations, so that they can be free and clear to shoulder some of that of the burden for the ones who do, because that's a lot to deal with. I mean, and I'm this is the year that I say, Devin Booker, max contract, max expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to make, and I know that it's, we've fallen into a habit of defending Devin Booker, making excuses for Devin Booker. Every single thing that happens from here on out, it's because this is the position that he's in. I don't care how unfair the criticism is. If you're a Suns fan, you got to roll with the punches, just like he has to roll with the punches. DeAndre Ayton is already facing a ton of scrutiny and criticism. Um, and part of that is just because of the draft class that he was part of, and the what ifs that are going to be part of that. I think you take that energy that you used to defend Devin Booker, shift that over to DeAndre Ayton, and just let D Book be who he's going to be. And then let these other players are going to do more than their fair share of protecting some of these guys from some of that. I was rewatching a clip from a couple of years ago of Kelly Oubre just absolutely destroying a guy who fouled him, and just one of the Celtics players, I can't remember who it was, that white guy with a man bun, but just running over and knocking him to the floor. And I was just thinking today that, like, man, there's going to be some moments like that with the Suns this season where someone tries to get in one of these star players' heads, and it's going to be 3 or 4 guys who rush over and get in their face and shoulder some of that burden, so it doesn't all fall on your star players. And so again, I cannot reiterate how excited I am to see a bunch of guys who love playing the game of basketball surrounding some people who are absolute supreme talents who need to learn to love basketball before their career is completely ruined from just wandering the desert.
Yeah, white guy, man bun Celtics. You're probably talking Kelly Olynyk is my guess.
Might have been,
Who
yeah.
that was, but you bring up an interesting point when it comes to Devin Booker, and yet we've, as much as anybody on this show, have come to the defense and really beat the drum for him numerous times this offseason. But I'm 100% agreeing with you in that camp where this is the year that he has to put up or shut up, because now he finally has a legitimate team around him, and it's time for him to live up to the hype, live up to the max contract, and live up to figuring out how to help this team win. Now, I don't expect mid 40s in terms of wins, but they need to get into the low 30s for this to be considered a okay year, a successful year, if you will, and a lot of that's going to depend on Devin Booker, and we need to see that from him. But I want to ask you, because you have a unique perspective, having covered high school here, you've covered college as well, so you've seen a lot of DeAndre Ayton before last year with the
Yeah.
Suns. Is there something that you saw in DeAndre, as I hate saying it this way, as a younger man, as in that
Okay.
in that growing that you saw that you haven't seen with him on the Suns, that you expect to see him grow into? Something you noticed?
Well, first of all, he can shoot, and he can shoot off the dribble, which is pretty wild. He is the best high school player I've ever seen. I'm one man with one opinion. A big part of my life is high school sports, probably more so football than basketball, but basketball is my first and longest love. And I am telling you, on the same team as Marcus Bagley, or Marvin Bagley. I'm sorry, Marcus is coming up through ASU right now. But on the same team as Marvin Bagley at Hillcrest. And apologies to anybody who wanted to see the two of them play together. Unfortunately, it was my website's reporting that ended up breaking that entire situation up. I selfishly, for entertainment purposes, I would have loved to see it too. But they definitely were not an accredited institution when I did my reporting, and that caused the Bagleys to ultimately leave and only have 3 or 4 games alongside Ayton. But I did see them play together, and I will tell you that DeAndre Ayton is not only the best high school basketball player that I have ever seen, he's just got an incredibly high ceiling because he does have a modern game, and I think he was sort of protected. Slash used a little bit at Arizona, where that wasn't what they needed from him. They didn't need him to go in and replace Lauri Markkanen. They looked at what they had with Lauri Markkanen and they said, we didn't make it far enough. We need somebody to bang on the inside, and we're going to use his. We know he's only going to be here 1 year, so we're going to absolutely play to his physical strengths. and then the same exact result, right?
Hmm.
Whereas they're not really able to make it that far in the tournament. But he comes to the Suns, and I don't think it made a lot of sense for him to go out and start shooting right away. And I don't think that in his second year you're going to see the like Alex Len 2018 2019 3-pointer growth from him. But just know that it's there, and know that when they do deem it appropriate, that this is going to be a really interesting element of his game, because he can dribble and he can shoot. But there's also that temptation to finally see what it would look like for the Phoenix Suns to have that true center that we have always longed for, even though the game sort of moved past whatever that is. Which brings me to another thing that I wanted to say is that I know that people are iffy on Frank Kaminsky. I think they'll fall in love with him because of his effort. But I look at him right now. I mean, right now, 3 preseason games in, and I'm like, man, this guy's in the top 10 of centers the Phoenix Suns have put on the court in the last 30 years
Hey,
as far as skill. So
I've already purchased all the land in Kaminsky Cove. You got to come to
I
me
heard you talk
if you want to
about that.
buy. If you
I
want to
heard you talk
buy.
about that. But he's extremely offensively skilled, and he's been in his NBA career. He's sort of been made into a little bit of a punchline. I think something that he maybe plays into with his personality, like me, a little bit self-deprecation, right?
Hmm.
But the truth is, this guy is an absolute weapon on the basketball court. And it's going to be fun to see him spell Ayton or play alongside him if he needs to. And then, Aaron Baines is a whole nother story that, I think people are really going to enjoy. But Ayton, there's a lot in store for him. I highly recommend exercising patience. All of his energy should really be focused on becoming somebody on the defensive side that can fit in with what the Suns need, right? And if that comes down to not guarding the 5, then that's really what it comes down to. But as we move on, we're not going to be able, you don't want games where JaVale McGee averages 5 points a game but drops 30, going 11 for 13 just because DeAndre Ayton is guarding him or something like that. So that's where his energy needs to be. But I'm telling you, from covering him in high school, the dude can shoot, and you'll see that eventually.
I feel like Kaminsky is very much like the 92-93 Suns, a victim of Michael Jordan and the fact that they just took him probably slightly earlier than probably should have, and then put him in a player development area that just wasn't really the greatest. I mean, we understand that here in Phoenix, guys can have all the talent in the world, but if they're not put in a situation to succeed, they're obviously they're not gonna look great. I think Kaminsky's probably looked better than a lot of NBA people have given him credit for, and I hope he gets that opportunity without that pressure here coming into Phoenix. He's not expected to be the starter. He's not expected to do much, so hopefully he can come in and just be himself, like we were talking about earlier, and just really somewhat blossom in that role off the bench. Hope to see that personally. But Ralph, I mean, we've never had you on the show before, but I know you're a lifelong fan, and you briefly touched on
Yeah.
basketball being kind of your first love. What was it about the Suns that kind of made you a fan originally? I always like to share those stories on the pod
Okay.
as well.
So I'm a 92, 93er, like a lot of people. I was 8 years old at the time, and I remember the season being exciting. I remember my dad, who was not really into sports at all of a sudden started watching a whole lot of Suns basketball. I spent a lot of time listening to the radio as a kid. I was grounded a whole bunch. And so I wanted to know why my dad was into that. And so I had this like little Sony boombox that could record like different radio shows or whatever. And I would record the Suns games if they were past my bedtime, or I would just straight listen to them if they weren't. And Al McCoy brought me into Suns fandom around 8, 9 years old. And then I remember the playoffs were just an absolute joy. And then my neighbor had an old beat up pickup truck, And this was like one of the first ever. Like me and my dad aren't super close. We are now, but not really then, and not really through the whole time of me living with him. But I remember one of the coolest moments between me and my dad, where we kind of bonded, was my neighbor painted the back of his truck to say PHUCK the Bulls, right? And I remember like staring at it for a second and then figuring out like, oh, that's the F word. I like looked at my dad, and he looks back at me and he's like, "You can say it." And so, like, right there, 8 years old, I dropped the F bomb in front of my dad for the very first time, kind of high fived or whatever. And it was just like, I just wanted the Suns to just destroy the Bulls because my neighbor's truck said they should. And then from that point on, was just completely in love. Listened to every single game on the radio, even if it was on television and Al McCoy wasn't on the call, I'd mute the TV. Lived and died, had absolutely weird infatuations with the strangest of players, not always, necessarily the stars. I asked my parents one year for like a Joe Courtney jersey, and they looked at me like I was, an insane person. And also they did not make those.
You want a good Joe Courtney story?
I do want a good Joe Courtney story, please.
A month and a half ago, I was at a conference in Boston, a marketing conference for my day job, and Joe Courtney actually gave a session, and I went to it because I didn't. It was about a championship mindset, and I didn't really care about the session. I literally did it because I wanted to go. I remember Joe Courtney playing basketball, and then I just sat and listened to him talk about his career. So, random Joe Courtney story.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And almost everything in my life, I relate back to some type of Suns memory, even very, very small things, like when I sneeze, which happens first thing every morning when I walk outside and the sun hits my face. I sneeze. And the first thing I think of every time I sneeze is there's a story out there that Wayman Tisdale sneezed while his wife was giving birth, and he broke like 3 ribs from sneezing so hard. And so just like even everyday little things, whenever I see like somebody getting absolutely screamed at for being annoying, I'm like, that person is a total Danny Ainge. And even on Twitter, my header photo is Michael Jordan getting so pissed off at Danny Ainge that he's got a finger like right in his face. And so I've been in love with the Suns ever since. This drought has been incredibly painful. I haven't really known what to do with all of the negative energy, but I'm an optimist and I just want things to work out, and I would love to be able to share that with my kids, because my oldest son, I have 4 kids. My oldest son is 11. He obviously was not old enough to remember that last playoff run. And one of the very last positive memories I have of the Suns, and maybe this was when you were talking about the 48-win team, when you were working there, was I remember being at the last home game of the season, and Matt Barnes took the microphone and apologized to the crowd. And that might not have been the 48-win. But I remember that happening. And I remember saying, like, man, these guys care, and that's what's most important to me. Yeah. And they haven't even been old enough to care for the longest time. I never really liked the whole McDonough thing. Tried not to be too like aggressively, outwardly pessimistic about it. The Sarver thing is Thanos; it's inevitable. So I don't really talk much about Robert Sarver.
Understandable.
But I remember one game into last year, after they beat the Mavs by 20 in the opening game, I felt excited, but more anxious than excited. They're kind of the same feeling. It's just the ultimate outlook you have. And it was, how are they going to ruin this? And I don't think this year can really be ruined for me. They're at the point right now where everything is so new that any positive thing that happens will spring a new little spring of hope to carry you to the next day. Even if they're getting blown out by 20, you're going to be looking at the positive aspects that you can take out of it, and know that they have different assets and ways to move, and a new GM who hopefully has autonomy, and a coach with lots of experience and humility and wisdom. I don't care what the record is, man. I think it's going to be a good year.
Yeah, I was the moron after that 20-point victory to start the season last year that jumped that gun a little fast, and I believe I wrote something about how everybody should probably thank Ryan McDonough because he built the foundation of what could be the next great Suns team. And I still believe that if Ayton and Booker and Bridges are around for the next great Suns team, but I was a little premature with that one. So, but I'm glad we've got another person who lived the same Al McCoy experience as me growing up, and kind of that's what lit the passion. I'm very much the same way. That's why here in the studio, if you're listening on the podcast, in the home studio, I've got an Al McCoy bobblehead that sits right above me in every YouTube video that we do. But the big part of why I do this still to this day. For the fun of it. A couple rapid fire before we get out of
Yeah,
here.
of course.
If you were Monty Williams, are you starting Kelly Oubre or are you starting Mikal Bridges at the small forward position?
Oof. I think that it would be okay to be like a baseball style Mad Hatter. As long as those guys know that you're going to get big, crucial minutes and it's going to be about the matchups, if they can put their ego aside, I really think that it depends on because neither one of those guys is someone you should really have to rely on for offensive rhythm. I like Kelly Oubre. I love his energy, his style. I mean, he's just a cool ass guy, right? But it's still not lost on me that during their 17 game losing streak last year, he had 8 separate occasions where he shot under 40%.
Yeah.
So when he's the hot hand, you go to him. But I don't necessarily you think that you need to find that out right away. If you bring him off the bench and he's good to go to get you 5 buckets in a 3 minute period, cool. If not, somebody else on this team, the way it's constructed, should be able to pick up that slack. But if that energy's there, how awesome is that for
Yeah.
for the Suns to be able to ride that wave? And if he's up for it, that's what I would advocate.
I think the nice thing is too that just because a guy starts a game, I mean, you can finish with whoever's hotter out of McHale and Oubre, or if you need the defensive firepower, you can have McHale play the longer minutes as well. So. Next rapid fire for you. Uh, so some people want to call Cam Johnson Shazam Cam. There's been some push for that online. I actually want to refer to him and Tyler Johnson as the plain white tees. If you were the czar of nicknames, which
Oh
one
my
would you go
goodness.
with?
So I'm not super great with I'm not super great with nicknames, but I mean the age jokes on Cam Johnson are pretty funny. And his name's Cam, so I don't know, like calling him Kodak since we don't even see those cameras anymore, and they're ancient or something. I mean, the only time I was ever frustrated with Al McCoy growing up is when because it was always so important to make sure that every player had a nickname. And sometimes they would absolutely nail it, right? Like the Matrix, you can't get better than that.
Hmm.
But I remember how hard and how long they struggled with Michael Finley, and I just was like, just quit talking about it. It'll come eventually. And then he was gone, and it didn't matter. But I will say that like maybe let's let it play out a little bit. I'm wary of interdependent nicknames just based on the fact that one could be gone and you break up the actual or metaphorical band, and that could be an issue.
Then he just
Um,
becomes the plain white tee. You just
the plain
take the
white tee,
plural.
yeah,
It just made me laugh because you don't see guys wearing the white T-shirt under their jersey anymore, and the Suns bench unit has two of those guys, and it just struck me as slightly odd. It looked like me when I'd play YMCA hoops, or when I was playing in a league as a kid. Just the lack of confidence. But I don't think it's Cam Johnson having a problem with the definition in his arms. It's actually like a concealed weapon. He's hiding those 3-point cannons there.
what did his teammates say like 400 times when he got drafted? Was it wow? Did he say
Yeah.
that over and over again? You just call him that because that's what
Wow.
I think of whenever I hear his name.
I agree. So, uh, can you, Ralph? Why don't you let people know kind of where they can find you? What
Yeah.
anything interesting that you're working on, anything like that? I want to give you the floor here.
I appreciate that, man. So, you can find me on Twitter at Ralph Amsden. If you're into car crashes, that's what that can be. Sometimes I wake up every day saying like today's going to be a positive day, and then I open my feed and someone's like, "Man, you're an idiot." I said something nice about Steve Keim today. I guarantee you, before 7 a.m., I'm in a Twitter fight with somebody over that. So and I apologize to any of your incredible loyal viewers who may have been part of that at some point. Follow me. Let's start fresh. And I cover high school sports, football and basketball for a Rivals affiliate, ArizonaVarsity.com. And I'm in the process of slowly, stage by stage, getting together a website called Arizona Sportscast. It is a local podcasts. And so, we got one covering high school football. We got one covering the Arizona State Sun Devils. Getting ready to launch a Cardinals podcast mid-season, which will make me seem like a bandwagon, capitalizing on all the Kyler attention. But it's been in the works for about a year. It's called Red Noise. And then got a Suns one coming down the pike.
We don't need any more Suns ones. No more. We have like 45 of them.
Here's the thing. You are 100% correct. We do not need any more Suns podcasts. So feel free to not listen to that one. But definitely tune into that. Or I also co-host, if you're into Pac-12 football, one of my favorite things that I do is I co-host a podcast called Pac-12 Apostles.
Greatest podcast nickname ever, by the way.
Thank you. I'm still trying. I'm working on the artwork for it, but it's every mascot at the Last Supper, and
beautiful.
I gotta run that by a few of my more religious friends. I'm gonna run that by my pastor and make sure that he's cool with it. But I host that with George Reister, former NFL tight end, and he's an absolute riot. He takes way more heat online than even I do. And most of our podcast focuses on my love affair for Arizona's Khalil Tate, which even Arizona fans don't like him. So that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, how about that left-handed touchdown pass that was really just a fumble to Washington the other night? Way to go there,
I said it
Ralph.
reminded me of trying to take your phone out of your pocket when someone pushes you in the pool, like you're on your way in the pool and you try to get rid of your phone onto dry land. That was what that was.
No, and honestly, I recommend if Ralph launches a Suns podcast, please do listen to it. Just don't take us out of your rotation. Take one of the other N95 Suns podcasts out of the rotation to listen to Ralph's, and I'm sure he'll sucker me into being on it more than I probably should be. I'm ready for some reps on the Red Noise. I'm wearing the Cardinals throwback lid as we do this as well, so I'm here for it.
Is that a Chicago?
That is the original Chicago Cardinals logo.
That's nice.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I highly recommend everything Ralph does. Big fan of his work. Happy to have him here on the solar panel. I got to give a shout out to Dave King, who he must be getting up for work right now. It's as we're recording this, it's almost 10:30 at night, and Dave King, who is way too old to be up at this time, is up listening, and he suggests CamWow instead of ShamWow for the nickname for Cam Johnson. So I like that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
We'll give Dave some credit. So thank you to everybody who's listening. Make sure to follow the show at Sun Solar Panel on Twitter. Follow or actually subscribe on wherever you listen to podcasts. Any of them. You can find us Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Pretty much you can type it in anywhere. You'll find us. Probably not some of them dirty sites, but everywhere else you can find the show. So for Ralph Amsden, I'm Greg Esposito, and we'll talk to you next time here on the Sun Solar Panel.